In the world of film today, every studio wants to have their own cinematic universe. The reason for this is quite simple. A shared universe means more films, and more films means more money. But this constant state of greed that movie studios are always in seems to have done a lot more harm than it has good over the years. Many of these films come off as obvious cash grabs that solely exist to set up a universe, sacrificing a clever script in the process and therefore affecting the overall quality of the movie. The whole cinematic universe thing is nothing entirely new. Many credit the Universal Monsters as the series of films that developed the idea, but I think it's fairly safe to say that the true trendsetters of modern cinema are the films of Marvel's cinematic universe. I'm not going to pretend that the MCU is a perfect franchise. If you ask me, I'd say most of their films range from mediocre to pretty good, with the Guardians of the Galaxy films being the exception just because I absolutely love those movies. But I will say that Marvel has at least worked their way up the ladder of success. The amount of money they're making now may be ridiculous, but it feels earned. One such cinematic universe that seems to have mostly failed in terms of quality, and yet has still succeeded in the money-making portion, is the Conjuring Universe. As a fan of horror, there's just something about this franchise that I find fascinating. The idea of a shared universe of ghost stories is something entirely new, and with the Conjuring films, Warner Brothers was gifted with a wondrous opportunity. With this idea, we were bound to get some of the creepiest and most clever horror films of the decade, right?
May God have mercy on your soul!
There are many things wrong with the Conjuring universe and its execution of a shared universe. This isn't just small, easy to pick apart continuity errors, but something far beyond that. To start off, we should take a look at the first film, The Conjuring. What is The Conjuring? Well, The Conjuring is the supposed true story of paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren as they come to the aid of the Perron family and uncover the secrets behind a spooky haunting. The first Conjuring is my shit. This may be a bold claim, but I think it's safe to call it one of the best horror movies of the decade. It may play things fairly safe, taking a lot of inspiration from past horror films like Poltergeist and Exorcist, but it's also well executed and probably director James Wan's best work. After Aquaman, of course.
Call me Ocean Master.
Annabelle was the first spin-off to follow The Conjuring, and while I don't hate that movie as much as most people, you just can't deny that it's a huge fall from grace. Annabelle was not based on a true story. In fact, the only Conjuring movies based on true stories, and I say that with big quotation marks, are The Conjuring 1 and 2. This seems to be a big issue with the series in the sense that a lot of these films are really held back in terms of just how crazy they can get. Everything has to be linked to either ghosts or demons, but the two are interchangeable, and the way in which these films use them, you can barely tell the difference most of the time. There's also that common issue that not just the Conjuring universe, but most ghost movies have, where not enough ground rules are set. It's made pretty clear throughout the series that these ghosts can kill you, but often when given the opportunity, they just don't. Though maybe I'm just being nitpicky, because otherwise they wouldn't really have a movie. The Conjuring 2 is the second strongest of the Conjuring films. It's far from perfect, but despite being one of the films based on true events, managed to be the most inventive and still a rather fun film. Conjuring 2 is more of a monster mash, introducing multiple new creepy ghosts and demons. And yes, I know this was all done just because Warner Brothers wanted more to work off of for their next few films, but it still makes the film far more entertaining than most of the series' other entries. The only real problem I had with Conjuring 2 is it falls victim to an over-the-top and more silly than scary finale. That kind of sums up a lot of what is wrong with these movies. The majority of these movies rely far too heavily on jump scares. Now, need I remind you, there's no problem with jump scares in themselves. There are ways to do them right and even make them the creepiest part of your movie. Some examples of films with excellent jump scares that perfectly nail the landing are Exorcist 3 and Mulholland Drive. Oh yeah, and Pee-wee's Big Adventure, for good measure.
It looked like this!
I think the problem with them in these films are that they are often the only thing they rely on, If you do a jump scare too much, it stops being scary and ends up just being annoying. One of my life's biggest regrets was seeing The Nun in IMAX by myself. Not because it was scary, but because out of all of these movies, that one relied on jump scares the most, and I left the theater with the worst headache. I also failed to mention that Conjuring 2 introduced the character of the Nun, a terrifying addition that was never given much explanation as to where she came from. I remember watching Conjuring 2 and wondering, what's her story? Obviously, a Nun movie was announced very soon after, and I was actually pretty intrigued in the idea of a gothic horror prequel starring this character, mostly because I just wanted to know what her deal was. So what is her deal? Who is this character, and why does she look like a nun? The movie's explanation? She's just some demon. These films have the opportunity to give these ghosts and demons more depth, but it never really takes them. These characters that could be tragic or made even scarier just end up being silly spooks and ghouls at the end of the day and nothing more. The Conjuring franchise feels less like a shared universe and more like a film series with a bunch of spin-offs. The best thing I can say about it is that I take a bunch of spin-offs over 7 direct sequels any day. These films fail to stand out from one another, all feeling too similar with an over-reliance on jump scares and very little variety. I think the reason this has always sort of bugged me is that there's so much you can do with horror movies, so many different subgenres that can be experimented with. But as long as these films are connected to a film that's based on a true story, they can never really break free from that. Not all the Conjuring films are bad. As I said, I liked 1 and 2, and I do find Annabelle Creation to be much better than the first one, but they're still not quite living up to their potential. Here's hoping, if horror ever does get another shared universe, that it will appeal to more than just the easily scared crowd, and find a way to do some generally creepy and creative things with it. That's all for now. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to be on the lookout for ghouls and goblins. They are everywhere. I would know.